from Marrakesh, where we were in the World Storytelling Cafe itself, to Mike Russ to say welcome to the World Storytelling Cafe, and we have moved this afternoon from Marrakesh. We were in the World Storytelling Cafe itself to
someone's streaming in, so
to Mike Russ to say welcome to the World Storytelling Cafe, and we have moved this afternoon from Marrakesh. We were in the World Storytelling Cafe itself to
someone's streaming in, so
to Mike. Over to you, Mike.
Good evening and welcome. I hope we've got it all. Is it feeding back through, or is it okay? Right, I'll get talking, we'll see what happens. My name's Mike Russ. Good evening and welcome. Right. I think we're okay. I think we're okay now. Right, good evening and welcome. My name's Mike Russ and I'm the director of the Get a Word in Edgeways Festival, which is in Much Wenlock in July. We'll get to talking about that later. So tonight is just an ordinary story round. Most of the faces I can see I've seen here before, so there's no reason for us not to just get started. And because it's an hour later here now, in British summertime we are in here, so it's 7 o'clock in the evening here now, which is for the ones based in the UK. And we call it the British and Irish Isles now, so it's and Ireland as well. And up in Scotland, I think there's probably 6 foot of snow according to our weather forecasts. But at least you're there to moan about it, Diana, so you'll be fine. Okay.
Good morning.
Right. So when we're telling the stories, we all mute. The batting, we're going to start off with Janet and then go to Maria and then Simona and then John and then Keith. And we might as well just get started. So over to Janet, who says Janet GB. So I think you are in Staffordshire, yeah?
I am right now in Staffordshire. We don't have any snow at the moment. I was planting out strawberries yesterday in the hail. Well, so keep your fingers crossed. Okay. I put straw around them to keep them warm. So there we go. Right, I've got a little story which I think is generally entitled A Bag Full of Tales or A Bag Full of Stories. And I believe it comes from Cambodia. I found it some time ago in a children's storybook. I think it's quite a charming tale. Lom, the young lad in the story, whenever he went to bed at night, the old retainer, the servant, would come and would tell him stories. They would be magnificent stories of, wizards, wicked wizards sometimes, wise elephants. There would be knights on horseback. There would be beautiful princesses. Whatever could be in a story, there was a story that Lom would hear throughout the whole of his boyhood. Lom told him a story. Lom was told a story every evening, and he loved them. He loved them so much that when he went out to see his friends, he boasted about them. He said what wonderful stories his servant had told him. And they asked Lom to tell him the story. But Lom would not. They are my stories. My stories. I want to keep my stories. And so throughout his boyhood, throughout his youth, he would never tell the stories. They never went beyond his room. As he grew older, he grew more and more handsome. He grew more and more interested in getting married. And it was the night before his wedding when he said to his old servant, Lom, I leave tomorrow. Tell me one last story. So Lom told him a story. It doesn't matter what story it was, but it was the last special story. And the servant watched the young man Lom as he fell asleep, dreaming of his wedding. The servant was about to leave, but he thought he heard mutterings in the room. He could see no one, and so he put his ear to each wall. He could hear mutterings and grumblings. And when he came to the cupboard, the mutterings and the grumblings seemed louder. So he opened the door of the cupboard, and in it he saw hanging from a rail a canvas bag. And the mutterings and the grumblings seemed to be coming from that bag, which seemed to have something wriggling about inside it. And he listened, and he heard these words. Don't like it being stuffed in this bag, squashed. I've been in here for years. And another voice said, I think that since he's going to leave us, we should plan revenge. The servant listened carefully, and this is what he heard. He heard a voice say, I'm a story that can change shape, and I am going to change myself into a well filled with water, which is going to have a poison in it. Because tomorrow Lom will drink from that well, and it'll give him a terrible, terrible pain in his stomach. Then there was a deep voice who said, I will also take my revenge on him. I am going to turn myself into a watermelon, large and green, and my pink flesh will look sweet and refreshing, but it won't be, because when he takes a bite, there will be poison in the juice, and the pain that he's already suffering will be worse than ever. That is the revenge that we will take for being neglected and trapped here. But then, an even more sinister voice hissed, I am a shape-shifting story, and I will shift myself into a snake, and I will bite his leg. And with my venom, and it was one of those hissing laughs which every listener to a story can imagine. And the old servant just listened. And then he shut the cupboard door. He looked at Lom lying there dreaming of his wedding. He went to his own bed, worrying what could he do to save Lom. The next morning, Lom was there, dressed in his wedding finery. He had a magnificent long waistcoat draped around him with gold trimmings. He had a small, neat, but highly bejeweled turban and long leather pants. For it was the custom of the day, the custom of his land, that the bridegroom would drive across the country. Not just drive, but ride upon a wonderful stallion to the town of the bride. And on the way, he would be acknowledged by all the people between his town and her town. His horse would have a bejeweled bridle. There would be a red leather saddle. Lom would sit astride this, and he would be led by the head groom in a magnificent silken green jacket. As Lom mounted the horse, and the groom in green stood beside it, the old servant went close to him and said, Lom, I have been with you for many, many years. One last favor I ask, one small favor. Let not your groom lead you on the route to your bride, but let me take the rein. Let me hold the horse. Let me lead you to your bride. Lom proudly looked down, and at first the servant thought that Lom was sneering, especially when Lom looked towards the magnificently attired groom and then back at the servant, and the servant expected that he would be dismissed, but no. Lom and Lom said, very well, you may lead me. You may lead me to my bride's town. And they set off, slow walking pace, so that he could greet everyone along the road. He could blow them kisses. He could pass them thanks. He could give peace messages. It was hot, the turban small and tight. He felt the pressure. He felt his lips dry, his throat dry. And as they went along the dusty road, he saw a well beside the road, and he begged the servant to stop. But the servant, he thought, he hasn't heard. He just walked straight by. Of course, you and I know why. But Lom did not and was irritated. Further along the road, the sun rose higher and higher, and Lom began to feel parched. He felt his throat closing in on him. And as he looked across the fields, he saw a whole field full of green, dark green watermelons. And he envisaged that pink flesh inside and that sticky sweetness, and he longed for it. And he asked his servant to stop. The servant didn't, and he shouted, "You didn't stop before, stop now, just stop." The servant didn't stop, but over his shoulder he said, "Lom, we're nearly there. When we get to your bride's house, there will be refreshments. There will be clear water. There will be sweet sherbets. There will be soft, gentle wines to refresh your palate." And by this time, they were past the watermelon field, and Lom could see the house of his bride ahead of him. And so he said no more. He was led into the house, and he was greeted by his bride's family. And all the time the old servant looked from side to side, past the well successfully, past the watermelons successfully. Where was the snake? Where was that hissing snake? And the wedding took place. The bride, of course, she was beautiful. He was handsome. Everybody was joyful. There was a magnificent feast. And afterwards there was singing and there was dancing. There was music of such high quality that people went into raptures. Eventually was the end of the celebrations. And Lom took his bride in his arms and he held her close. And they went to their room. And there was their first special moment together, alone. But the door burst open, and in rushed the servant. In rushed that servant with a great bat, almost the size of a baseball bat. It was huge, and he raised it above his head, and he brought it down. Lom stepped back, but he brought it down on the rug on which Lom was standing. And Lom said, "What did you do that for? You could have killed me. You will be punished for this." The servant simply rolled back the rug, and there, lying, squashed, completely lifeless, was a large, dark brown, poisonous snake. "How did you know?" said Lom. "How did you know?" The servant said, "I have been watching for that snake throughout the feasting, throughout the dancing, throughout the singing and that magical music. So it had to be hiding where you would be alone. I just knew that I had to save you. But how did you know? I mean, you couldn't just guess that a snake was going to attack me. And that is when the old servant told Lom the story that I have told you. Lom sat on the side of the bed with his bride and said, see, you see, I must never trap stories again. I must share them. I must let them live. And the bride agreed. And so when they had their children, he told stories to their children. And the children told stories to their children. And the children told stories to their children. And you may be wondering how I know this story. Well, it's quite simple. I've just listened to all the stories, and the stories have told me their secrets. And I hope you'll pass this story on to anybody who will listen.
Thank you, Janet. That was lovely. So where do you say you thought the story came from?
I think it comes from Cambodia, and I found it in a little children's storybook. It's a tiny little thing called Stories from Around the World. It's designed for children, and it's by somebody called Heather Avery, I think. Heather Amory.
Well, I think there must be many places where that story's come from, because I read it being so it came from Sri Lanka and India and places like that. So it is that part of the world. So it was a lovely story, and thank you very much.
Thank you.
Now then, we're going to go to Maria, whichever you bet, right. But just before we go any further, Simona, can you just unmute yourself for a second? You're going to go number 3. How do you put that on the chat?
What?
That little face on the chat. That is so cool. It's you must be really clever.
No,
Can you tell us? If everybody goes onto the chat, you can see that Simona has put a little sort of cartoon face of herself on it or something, right? That is so cool. That's going to be really impressive in the middle of my serious business meeting, so I want to know how to do that. Okay.
Well,
Maria,
when you write a message, okay, I'll tell you.
Write it up for us, okay? Maria, so what have you done today?
So can you see the picture behind me?
Yeah, it's Rome.
One. It's the
Greeks.
No, it's in Italy.
Italy.
It's the Arena of Verona, one of the most ancient amphitheaters in Italy.
Right.
And few people know the legend behind the construction of the arena. And now it's your turn.
You need to tell your government to get on and put a roof on it. Okay. It's not finished. They need to get it finished. Okay.
Okay.
Right.
He's trying to make a joke.
Okay.
Right. You just get started and I'll shut up. Okay.
Okay. So a long time ago, in the town of Verona, a rich man called Piero dwelt in this town. One day, he was unjustly accused of stealing. He was imprisoned and sentenced to death. He was so desperate that he couldn't stop crying in jail because he knew that he couldn't escape his fate. However, the night before the execution, the devil appeared before him. "Hello, man. What's wrong with you? Why are you so upset?" asked the devil with a mocking smile. "What do you want from me? Leave me alone," cried Piero. "But I'm here to help you," said the devil. "How can you help me? I will die tomorrow," replied the poor Piero. "Well, I have an idea for you. There is one thing that people of Verona have been craving for a long time: the construction of a huge and magnificent amphitheater. Why don't you offer them to build it? You have a lot of money, and you can ask for freedom in return. But I will die tomorrow, replied Piero. No man can build such a great amphitheater in such a short time. It's an impossible feat. No man can, you're right, said the devil. But I'm not a man. I'm the prince of darkness. I will build the amphitheater for you by the end of this night. But in exchange for your soul, you will continue to live your life. But remember, your soul will belong to me forever. Piero pondered the offer, but he was so desperate that he accepted. So the deal was signed, and the devil opened the gates of hell, and hundreds of demons poured into the streets of Verona, and in the middle of the town, they began to build the amphitheater, stone by stone, with hammers and chisels. But as time went by, Piero was still in jail, and the more he thought, and the more he realized that he had made a terrible mistake. So he spent the night praying the Virgin Mary to forgive him. I pray you, Holy Mary, I beg you, forgive my sins. Please, Holy Mary, save my soul, he repeated. And suddenly something happened. Hundreds of angels appeared from the clouds, and the clouds were hit by the first light of dawn. It was a magnificent image, and the angels rang the bells of the church. And hearing the bells, the devil and the demons, they fled back to hell. They left the amphitheater incomplete. The bells were ringing, and people of Verona, they went on the street because they were awakened by the bells. And so they saw this beautiful amphitheater appeared from nowhere. And then they heard the shoutings came from prison. It was Piero. Please, please, save me, save me. So the crowd rushed into the prison, and Piero tried to explain them what happened. The devil, the offer, and the angels. He prayed the Virgin Mary. It was a divine sight for him, but no one believed him. So at last chance, he said, I am a rich man. With my money, I can help you to complete the amphitheater. But please, let me set me free, please. And so they accepted. And Piero regained his freedom, and he completed the Arena of Verona. And the arena is still there today. And it's admired by visitors from over the world. And that's the legend and the end of my story for you. Thank you.
Right. Well, Maria, thank you very much. That was a lovely story, and it was well told. I have a question for you. How many languages do you speak?
My native language.
Yeah, you speak Italian, yeah?
Yeah, yes.
English?
And I'm learning English.
Yeah. Do you speak any other languages?
No, I don't.
No. Well, I speak English and a bit of French. And to tell a story in a foreign language is a really difficult thing to do, and you've done very well. And thank you very much for being here. Okay?
Thank you. Thank you.
Right, Simona. Right, I've worked it out. I did it. Okay, so it's going to be so cool. Most of my business friends, I'm in my 60s, they won't know how to do that. I'm going to really impress someone tomorrow morning. Right,
great.
so we go over to Simona. Okay.
Yeah. So I'm going to tell you an Irish story I told a couple of weeks ago for St. Patrick's Day. We did an event with my school and I had to tell some stories. It's not the usual kind of story I tell, but I'm going to try out with an experienced audience. So there was once a businessman, and this businessman had to go from town to town to town selling tea. But one evening, he was moving from one town to the next when a great storm broke out. He hadn't reached his town, so he looked around desperately, but he saw a light far away. And so, with his horse, he went towards the light, and he saw that it was a little stone cottage. And it was one of those old Irish cottages with white walls outside. And so the businessman went off his horse and he knocked at the door, and the woman opened the door. And so the businessman asked, "Oh, please, can I stay for the night?" Yes, they accepted. And the businessman entered, and he saw that it was one of those old cottages with one big room and one big bed where everybody slept. There lived a woman, her husband, and a child who slept in the cradle. And the woman and her husband were happy to invite him to stay, even if that meant that they all had to sleep in the same bed. The businessman entered the house, and as soon as he had entered, he smelled delicious perfume of a cream cake the woman had just baked, and that was there on the table to cool off. His eyes widened and his mouth started watering. The woman noticed this and she asked him, "Would you like a slice of cake, dear?" He just nodded. But no, the woman was stopped by her husband. "No way he's having a piece of cake tonight. The cake is still warm, and if you cut it now, you'll spoil the cake for the rest of us tomorrow. No way, no way, no, 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 absolutely." And so it was. The businessman didn't eat the cake, and they all went to bed. The woman on one side, the husband in the middle, and the businessman on the other side. And the husband particularly insisted on being in the middle of the bed because, well, that businessman wanted to eat his cake. He wanted to spoil his cake. What else was he up to? He didn't trust the businessman anymore. And so they started sleeping, but the husband had some problems, and from time to time he had to go outside for a pee. And every time he had to go outside, he would take his wife with him and carry her out. And this went on for a couple of times. And after a couple of times, the woman started complaining, "Why do I have to come out with you every time you have to go outside to pee? Don't you trust me?" And this went on for another couple of times, and after those, the woman just said, "No way, I'm coming out with you again. No, 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 you just have to trust me." And so the man, who really had to go outside, he couldn't stay there. He took the cradle of the baby and he put it in the middle of the bed to separate the woman and the businessman. And so he did time after time. But once, in the middle of the night, the storm grew so loud and strong that it started raining inside the house. And the man, in the rush of going outside to find a solution to repair the roof, he completely forgot to bring his wife with him or to put the cradle in the middle of the bed. Psst, 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 said the woman. Psst, hey, now it's your chance. And the businessman looked at the woman, his eyes wide, full of desire. And without a second hesitation, he stood up, he ran to the table, he cut a slice of cake, and he ate it. It was delicious. Thank you.
Right. That's a very nice story and it's very well told. Are you looking for other stories like that? Because if you're looking for other stories like that from the British Isles, we've got a few you can have. You can gladly have them. They can, John and I would say, they come under the sort of category of comedic stories sometimes. Comedic means comedian, funny stories, but they're not jokes particularly. They're longer stories. And we've got hundreds of those. So if you ever get to, are you coming over to the UK this summer? If you're coming over to the UK, if you come over to the UK, make sure you come up to Shropshire and visit me. And there's another chap called Taffy Thomas. He lives up in Cumbria, right? And I'll tell you this one, and then we're going to go to John, and John's going to do some poems. But Taffy Thomas has got a pacemaker. Now, he's had a pacemaker, which helps his heart. He had a heart attack in 1982. So they put a pacemaker in 1982, which was 37 years ago, which is a long time before you were born, Simona. Okay, but it was an old-fashioned one, so it was a clockwork one. So it was going tick, 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 tick. Right. So when his wife Chrissy he came out of hospital and they go to bed for the first time, and she's lying in bed, and Taffy sat there, and all she can hear is the tick, 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 tick of the pacemaker. She goes, you know, Taffy, I don't think I can go to sleep. I think it's making too much noise, your pacemaker. So Taffy goes, if you hear it stops, you'll be the second one to know. Okay. So how do I know that story? Because Chrissy Thomas told it me. Okay. So you know it's true. And if you want to take that story, you take that story, you carry on with it. And okay, pretty much. Now we're going to go to a person with a big red hat who's looking half dead, or half alive. And John, you wait, John. You're on mute. You're on mute, mate. Now, here we go.
I'm muting.
No, I can be a bit amusing with John because he's getting over a bout of COVID, but he's just about through it now, aren't you, mate?
I don't know. I feel like I've run 1,000 miles and I've walked about 2 inches. But I want to do 3 poems, short poems, from and it's one I put into an anthology the other day called The Pity of War, The Poetry is in the Pity. And this first one is called, and it's on Peachy Publications. It's all for Ukraine, obviously. Below the earth beneath us. Below the earth, below the mulch, below the terrifying noise of the top layer, roots are talking to each other. Roots of saplings full of anticipation chatter away at the speed of light, eager for a growth spurt. They want to see what all the excitement is about. The ancients say nothing. They have been through this time and time again. They keep a quiet vigil, confident when all is done above them, some will survive, and hoping there will still be lovers to feel the weight of. The skies are blue. It's 2022. The skies are blue, the view notwithstanding the ash clouds on the horizons, where opera houses are weaponized, where spies are not disguised anymore. This is war. Refugees cross borders in their thousands. They look like us. So there is less fuss beyond bureaucratic incompetence than with darker-skinned individuals fleeing a fate that is death, but the result is the same. Insane psychopathopaths rise to the top the world over, travel without paperwork, infecting each other with enough grade. And that travels well, rests a spell before exploding one more time across the news channels of the world. And the final one is, I wrote this in response to what's happening here, but same thing's happening in America. It's called Let Them In. Knocking at our door, children, grandmothers, mothers, young women, let them in. Knocking at our door, the traumatized, the weary, those with nothing left but memories and the desire to go back sometime, let them in. Knocking at our door, people we give forms to, drive them from pillar to post, say online applications are an improvement, say we are just trying to keep our people safe, safe from that 8-year-old confused on our doorstep, let them in. For God's sake, for goodness sake, for the sake of our own humanity, let them in.
Well said, John. Well said, John. Well said. Right. So, right, Simona, Eamon Kelly. Eamon Kelly was about 5 foot tall. And when I met him, he was about 60 and I was about 30. And we spent quite a bit of our times together. And he told me quite a few stories from the Isles of Ireland, which I still tell to this day. And he would be delighted that a young, good-looking and talented storyteller like you were telling his stories. Okay. Right, Keith.
Hello, everybody. Now, now, there was a young man that lived in these parts, and it wasn't so long ago, and his name was Jack. And he lived with his mother, and she looked after him very well. But the problem that Jack had is that he wasn't very clever. He had no brains. And when he went to the village, all the young people there, the girls and the boys, they would just make fun of him because he was so silly. And his mother became very concerned because she said to Jack one day, now I am getting old and I'm soon to leave this world, and you've no brains, and so you need to get some so you can look after yourself. She said to Jack, you go up the hill to the old lady that lives in that cottage right on top of the hill and buy some brains. And just you be sure that you are very pleasant to her and very, very kind to her. And don't be rude. And so the next day, Jack set off and he went up the hill and he went into the cottage door, knocked on the door, and the old lady opened the door and said, "Nah, Jack, what can I do for you?" And he thought, well, he'll pass the time of day, as his mother said. I said, well, it's a nice day today. Hey, she said, it's a nice day today. I see they're drilling a lot of wheat now. It's it's getting nice and dry weather. Hey, she said, yeah, and they're doing some top dressing as well. Hey, she said. And he got to the point where he'd been kind enough and gentle enough, and he fidgeted about and said to the old lady, well, can you sell me some brains? Because I need to look after myself eventually, and I just can't. And she said, well, what kind of brains do you want? Because I haven't got any scholars' brains, any teachers' brains, any soldiers' brains, or a king's brains. What kind of brains do you want? And Jack said, any kind of brains will do, any kind of brains. And so she said to him, well, you come back tomorrow with the heart of the thing that you love the most. And I'll ask you the question just to check that that's right, that it is the right thing. And then you can have some brains. And so Jack went back that night and he had to think about what was the thing that he loved the best. And it was getting near tea time, and he thought, fat bacon. Yeah, the pig, that's what I love the best. And he went home and he told his mother, and she said, well, if the old lady says you've got to take back the heart of the thing you love the best, they let her kill the pig. And so he did that night. He butchered the pig and he took the heart out of the pig and he put it in a brown paper bag. And the next morning he set off up the hill to the cottage, knocked on the door again. And the old lady opened the door and said, now, Jack, have you brought me the heart of the thing that you love the best? Hey, he says. And he took out the heart that was in the brown paper bag and he laid it on the table and he said, it's the pig and I've killed it and I brought the heart. And she said to him, well, just to make sure that this is right, then you've got to answer this question. And she said, what do you think is that runs but has no legs or feet? And Jack thought to himself, oh, what was runs? And he didn't know. And she said to him, well, you come back tomorrow with a heart of the thing that you love the best. And so he went back thinking about that and said, what do you love the best? And he got nearly home and somebody rolled up to him and said, come quick, your mother's not very well. I think she's dying. And so he went into the cottage, went up the stairs and his mother was laying in bed and she smiled at him and said, Jack, did you get any brains? He said, no, I didn't get any brains this time, but never mind. I'll have to have a think about it. And she's, oh dear. And she closed her eyes and she died. She was dead in bed. And Jack, he cried and cried and cried and cried as he held her hand, and he realised that it was his mother that he loved most of all. But he hadn't the heart to cut her heart out. So next morning he borrowed a sack from a neighbour and he's put his mother's body, heart and all, into the sack over his shoulder and went up the hill to the old lady's cottage and knocked on the door. She opened the door. Now, Jack, have you brought me the thing, the heart of the thing that you love the best? And Jack said, yes, I love my mother more than anything else, but I couldn't cut her heart out, so I brought her whole body. And he laid very carefully the sack with his mother's body in it and laid it before the old woman. And the old lady said, well, just to check that it's right, this is the thing that you love the best. Tell me, what's round and yellow and it's shiny, but is not gold? And Jack said, oh, so he thought and said, oh, I'm sorry, I don't know. And he had to leave. And he walked down the hill and he sat beside the road and he was crying. He'd lost his pig and he'd lost his mother. What was he going to do? Because he hadn't any brains to look after himself. And who should come up but a young lady? And she said, and her name was Jenny. She said, Jack, what's the matter? And Jack told her what had happened, about he'd lost his pig, had lost his mother, and he couldn't buy any brains. And he says, I just can't look after myself because I ain't got enough brains. And Jenny thought to herself, well, young men that haven't got any brains make good husbands. And she said to him, well, look, Jack, I'll look after you. We can get married and I'll look after you. And Jack said, well, can you cook? Yes, I can cook good steak and kidney pie. I can cook, yeah, well, can you clean? Hey, he says, I can clean the cottage and make it nice and spick and span. I can do that. He said, well, can you sew? Hey, I can sew, I can mend all your clothes, he said. And so, in a few weeks' time, Jack and Jenny, they were married and they were very happy together. And then one night, Jack thought to himself, well, it's Jenny, my wife, that I love the best. And he said to her, Jenny, I let her kill you and cut out your heart and take you to the old lady so I can get some brains. And she said to him, well, Jack, you didn't have to do that with your mother. You took her whole body. I can go on there with you. But you told me about these questions that the old lady asked you. What were they? And he said, well, what she asked me, what runs but has no legs or feet? Oh, that's simple, she said. It's water that runs in the river and in the beck. Oh, yeah, he said, yeah. And the second question she asked me, he said, was, well, what's round and gold and and yellow and shiny, but it isn't gold? And they said, oh, of course, that's simple. It's the sun. Oh, yes, he said, that's right. And so the next day they set off. I went to the old lady's cottage, top of the hill, and knocked on the door. The old lady opened the door and said, now, Jack, oh, I see you got your missus with you. He says, it's Jenny, my missus, that I love the best of everything else. And I brought her heart in her body whole. And the old lady said, oh, right, okay, just to prove that, tell me, what has no legs, what has 2 legs, and what has 4 legs? And Jack said, oh dear, what's that? Anyway, Jenny whispered in his ear, it's a tadpole. It's a tadpole. Jack said to the old lady, there you are, she said. There you are, that is right. And now you've got your brains. And he looked around, he couldn't see any brains anywhere. And he looked in his pockets, he couldn't find them. Well, where's my brains? And the old lady said, the brains are in the head of your missus, in Jenny's head. And so Jack and Jenny, they walked down the hill hand in hand, as happy as could be, because she had enough brains in her head for both of them.
Well, Keith, you can almost feel and taste the Fens from you telling that story. That is a real Fenland story from East Anglia, and it's lovely to hear it.
Yeah,
well told.
I always know it's a Lincolnshire story, but I did hear it in Orkney once, so it does travel the world.
Oh, well, I've heard it in Norfolk,
right,
and on the Fens in Cambridgeshire and those places there.
Yeah.
But Lincolnshire is part of East Anglia, isn't it? Really, it's part of the Fenlands. Yeah. Right, great. Thank you very much. But Bubba, for something completely different from the accent of the Fens to you, my friend. So.
First of all, Keith, I love the ending of your story. It's a story that many a husband and many a wife's boyfriend knows.
Yeah.
Okay.
So what's the most surprising thing about a successful marriage? The surprise mother-in-law.
So my story is a little bit different, and it takes place in a time long before the history of the whiskey that Mike enjoys takes place long before John Roll's beard had turned white, or Keith for that matter, or the meadow that he's sitting in front of had begun to grow. This story takes place long before any of the ladies in our presence were even wee bits of a lass. This story is older than time, but not quite so. And this is an Anansi story. Now you see, a long time ago, so long people don't know quite when nor where, Anansi was going through a rough patch. He was so lazy that he did not want to work. He did not want to plow a field. He did not want to grow a garden. He had a small hut that he begrudgingly built himself to keep the rain off of him and the animals away. But it had been so long since he had had any money or things to barter with. His clothes had grown worn and frayed, and he had become very skinny. Some say if he turned sideways, you could not see him. But Anansi would go about his ways because he is trickster. And he met someone named No One. And No One was the exact opposite of Anansi. No One had riches beyond description. His clothes were the finest that could be found. He lived in what many would call a palace or a compound. He did very well, and he had no problem about helping his neighbors who were less fortunate. But No One would go and visit the villages. Anansi and No One met eventually at the crossroads, and Anansi in his craftiness realized that this was someone he should get to know. And so Anansi used his cunning to become a good friend to No One. And Anansi and No One became very close friends. No One often had him over to dinner, to breakfast, to lunch. And then it came that time of year when they both decided it was time to take a wife, or back in those days, wives. And so No One and Anansi began to walk to a village where they thought they might have some luck in finding wives. And they walked, and they walked, and they walked, and they walked. Why were they walking? Cars had not been invented yet. Well, it was hot, and then it was cold. It was cold and it was wet. And as they got near to the village, Anansi turned to No One, whose name was actually nothing. I messed that up, but that's okay. He turned to No One and he said, I am so cold and I'm so tired. Could I wear your clothes just long enough to get warmed? And so Nothing said, sure, because he thought of Anansi as a very dear friend and he wanted his friend to be comfortable and well. So they exchanged clothes, and Nothing put on the torn, ragged clothes of Anansi, and Anansi put on the finery that was Nothing. And they proceeded to go to the Kijiji, the village. When they got there, the women flocked around Anansi because he was dressed so fine. They just knew he had to be rich, and they were very rude and disrespectful to Nothing because he was dressed like a pauper, a peasant. What business did he have in their village? Oh, and the women flocked around Anansi and they were having a good time talking. But one lady looked at Nothing and said, you have a very kind soul. You are a very nice man. If you would like, I think we could make this work and I would be glad to be your wife. Nothing was very, very proud and very happy. And so he and the young lady became husband and wife. And Anansi picked 3 of the ladies from the village and they began to walk back toward their homes. And they walked and they walked and they walked and they walked. because my cars had not been invented yet. And as they got to the fork in the road, I wonder if it could have been a spoon in the road. As they got to the fork in the road, nothing stopped just in front of his house. His palatial compound that had guards standing along the stairs to protect him from any enemies or animals that might come along. And his wife was just so happy. Oh my goodness, oh my goodness. I don't do good women voices, forgive me. And so the three women married to Anansi thought, well, if this is his house, whoa. But when they walked down the road, they saw a hut that was barely strong enough to hold itself up. And they thought, well, maybe it looks bigger on the inside. And they went inside and they were hungry, but all Anansi had was some unripe fruit. And he fed that to them and they were not happy. And so Nothing's wife came next door and she said, you're invited to have dinner, to have a meal at our place. And so the three hungry women rapidly followed her, Mrs. Nothing, and they rapidly followed her back to the great big palatial compound. Oh, and they ate and they ate and they ate and they ate and they ate. They ate so much it became 9. That's a very bad pun, ignore it. But then they refused to go back to Anansi's hut. And Anansi invoked and said, no, you must come back to my hut, you are my wives. And they refused him. They were not going to do it. And Anansi got very angry, very jealous, and he consorted to come up with a plan to kill Nothing. But he couldn't kill Nothing because the guards would keep him from getting into the palace. He didn't know what to do. And then Anansi got an idea, and he went out and he talked to the rats and convinced the rats to dig a great big hole just in front of Nothing's home, in front of his palace. And he filled the hole full of shards of glass and sharp metal. And then in the night, he managed to sneak past the guards and put oil, palm oil, on the steps. And then he waited for nightfall. And when nightfall came, he ran up the road and he shouted, Nothing, Nothing, Nothing. I need to see you now. I need to see you now. And Nothing, hearing his friend, came out of the house, ran down the stairs. His foot slipped and he fell into the hole. And all the sharp, jagged edges cut him asunder, cut him to bits. His wounds were too deep for him to recover from. And his wife, in her grief, went back into their palace and she pounded fufu and other roots and made nice little flavorful cakes. And she went to town and she was so beset with sadness and grief. She went to town and she shared the cakes, but especially when she saw the children, she gave them the best, the sweetest, the tastiest of cakes. And they were so thankful, so thankful. And to this day, often when little children are seen crying and their parents say, what's wrong? Why are you crying? They will go, oh, it's nothing. Asante.
Thank you very much.
Keith, I think I was using your rhythm there, but thank you.
Right, so we're going to go to Diana from the Highlands then, and then Manuela, are you going to finish up for us? Have you got a story tonight for us, Manuela?
If you wish, but I'm happy listening tonight.
It's up to you. I never pressure anybody to. You're very welcome to do something if you want to. Okay. Right, Diana. So we'll have a taste of the Highlands, or maybe not, depending on where we go.
Well, it is set in Scotland. Anyway, quite a long time ago, there was a family who stayed on the edge of a wood. And there was a mum, the dad, and 3 sons. And the 3 sons had to help out a lot because at the time it was, very much hand-to-mouth existence. But anyway, the father, he had to tend some of the sheep, and the mother had to do cooking. So it was up to the eldest to go out and chop some wood, which they needed for their stove, which meant they could have heating, and it also meant that they could cook any food that they had. So off he would go, and he had a backpack and he had some food in it and some water. And he got well into the forest and he decided, right, I'm going to cut these trees down. And that's what he did. Well, a short time after he started going chop, 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 there was this little old man came along, and he looked quite odd. He had long shorts, woolen socks, and these crazy little shoes with big buckles on them, and a little red cap. And well, he was quite different to any old man that this young man had seen before. And the old man said, I see you've got a haversack with you. Do you have any food? Because I'm very hungry. So the eldest son that had been sent out said, oh yes, I have food, but no, I'm not going to share it. I've got a lot to do. I can't stand talking to you. I've got to go chop, chop, chop. And he kept chopping until he hurt his arm, and then he had to go home. Well, after that, the middle son came out, and he would carry on where the other one had left off. And he saw what he'd been doing, so that's fine. And he had some food with him, and the little old man appeared again, and he said, oh, I'm very hungry, I'm very hungry. Do you have any food that you could share? Well, the middle son said, yes, I do have some food. But no, I'm not going to share it because I need it. I need it for all the strength I'm going to have to get in order to chop these trees down. And he kept going chop, 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 until one of the times when he chopped, the wood fell right on his leg. And oh dear, he had to limp home because he wasn't going to be able to carry the wood home, and he wasn't going to be able to do any more chopping. So they had to send the youngest one now. The ribbing that the youngest one got, it was just, he had to be thick-skinned because his older brothers were always teasing him that he always got off the easiest, and how he wasn't very strong, and he wasn't very clever, and he wasn't very this, and he wasn't very that. But the young one just kept his own counsel. And he set out, well, by the time he set out, all he had were some rough oatmeal biscuits and some cheese and some water. And he got to the bit in the forest, and he got out his axe, and he thought, right. But just as he was about to strike the first bit of wood off, he noticed this little old man with the woolen socks, with the funny looking shoes, with the big buckles, and with the red cap. And the old man said, oh, I don't suppose you have any food, do you? I'm very hungry, I'm very hungry. And well, the youngest said, yeah, sure. And he opened up his haversack and he put out the oat cakes and the cheese and the water, and they shared it between them. And that was great. Then he got back to his chopping, and he chopped and he chopped and he chopped. And he was just doing really well when the little old man said, I think you should go and chop down that tree over there. You see that one right over there in the corner? I think you'll get a lot of wood out of that, and it'll just be perfect. So the young boy thought, okay, that's what I'll go and do. And he started chopping, and it took quite a long time, but he persevered and he stacked everything up neatly so that it would be easy to carry home. But right in the middle of the tree, right deep down in the middle of the tree, was a golden goose with beautiful feathers. Oh, it was quite amazing, and it hopped out. And the young man looked round, but well, the old man had gone, and he didn't understand, but well, he had this goose now. And it was beginning to get very late by now. And he decided that he would stop cutting wood for today. And the next day he would pack everything up and take all the wood home. So he decided to go to the inn for a night, which wasn't far away. And just as he was arriving at the inn, the innkeeper's daughters were there, and they saw this golden goose. And they thought, wow, I've never seen anything like this before. Isn't it wonderful? Wouldn't it be great if I could just have one feather thought the eldest. And with that one feather, then I'll put it in my cap and everybody will think I'm amazing and all my friends will be jealous because I have this golden feather. And the second one said, yes, I know, I would love a feather too. And I'm going to make it into a quill. And I'm going to write all these letters to all my friends. And the third one said, well, she was the youngest. I would love a feather. And what I'll do with it is I will use it as a tickling stick because she was just that bit more mischievous than her sisters. And she loved to tickle people when they least expected it. So they all had their eye on this golden goose. Well, the man was given a room and of course the goose went with him. But once he'd fallen asleep, the three girls were there and were very crafty. One of them opened the door and threw some crumbs down. And of course, not right away, but then this golden goose came over and ate up the crumbs and out it came. And they got hold of the goose. Well, they would each get their feathers and then they would just go on their own way. That's what they thought. But well, the first one, the eldest one, who wanted to put one in her cap, she got hold of this goose and she pulled and she pulled, but she couldn't pull it out. And then her hands were stuck fast. And what could she do? She couldn't do anything. She was stuck fast to this golden goose. Okay, so her sister would help her. So her sister pulled onto the back of her and they pulled, but still. And after that, the sister was stuck to, the middle sister was stuck to the oldest sister who was stuck to the golden goose and couldn't get the feathers. And then the youngest one came along and surprise, surprise, she got stuck as well because she would help because they all wanted feathers and they couldn't understand why this was happening. Well, they didn't get much sleep that night because they were all stuck together and no one could get comfortable. But in the morning, the young man, he'd had a good night's sleep. And there was something about this young man, you know, he seemed to be pretty unflappable. I mean, I don't know any people that are quite so unflappable as all that. It's when they see people like a goose and three people all stuck together, they don't even raise an eyebrow. But he was one of these people that I would love to be like, but I'm sure that I'll never be like. Anyway, he saw them and he thought, right. So he got the goose and then they all followed on behind. They had no option. And they went out into the countryside and it was quite early in the morning, but this farmer was out. And he just happened to be a bit near one of the young girls, brushed against her, and he ended up getting stuck. And he said to his wife, set me free, set me free. So she came running over and you've guessed it, she got stuck. And it was beginning to look a bit ridiculous, this long chain behind the golden goose. And then they went into the village. Well, the butcher was just putting out his sign in the morning and so was the baker. And they went to see what all the fuss was about. But they just got a bit too close. And then there were 7 people in a row behind this goose. And it was looking ridiculous. And they walked round the square just at the same time as the laird and his daughter arrived. And the daughter was in the carriage. Now, he wasn't a popular laird. It's just not true that all Scottish people are grumpy, but this one was. He was so grumpy. He never even opened his mouth wide enough for a smile. He just couldn't seem to do it. But when he saw this parade round about him, all these people and the goose, and then his daughter came out of the carriage and he came out, well, his daughter started. She just couldn't believe it. She started to laugh, just like a tiny snigger. And then, and you know what? Right at that moment, she elbowed her father, the laird, like that. And well, that made him pay attention. And when he paid attention, he thought to himself, how ridiculous the people looked, all stuck together. and they laughed together. And they laughed and they laughed and they laughed so much that the golden goose started to flap its wings. A bit and a bit more and a bit more, and it got free and everybody fell over and all the legs were sticking up in the air. And meanwhile, the laird and his daughter thought this was even more funny, so they started laughing again. Now, you might be thinking to yourself that this is a story of a golden goose, and don't golden geese lay golden eggs? But not this golden goose, no. But what he did do, when no one was watching, he dropped a feather. And you know what? The young man, he picked up the feather, he made it into a quill, and at the behest of the laird, who kept remembering about this funny incident long afterwards, and it cheered him up when he remembered about it, the laird asked this young man to write the story down. And that's what he did, and that's why I'm able to tell it to you today.
Oh, that's lovely. That's absolutely lovely, Diana. Thank you very much. Right, so this is the World Storytelling Cafe, and this is in conjunction with the Get a Word in Edgeways Festival, which is down here in Shropshire on the 8th, 9th and 10th of July, which is the second weekend. But I've been also thinking a couple of things, because they've got this is all set up to the World Storytelling Cafe, and the World Storytelling Cafe is based in Marrakesh, as we all know, in Morocco. And they're going to have their big thing in February. And I was wondering if we fancied a bit of a jolly baba and some of the others, Diana and Janet and John, as if we could go over maybe in November and do this is what we're doing now, but in the Storytelling Cafe itself in Marrakesh. Now, I am pretty certain that if we ask really, really nicely to the people over there, we can get some accommodation sorted out. And so it's only going to cost the cheap air flights there and back. Now, if anybody's interested, because I think I'm doing this myself, so one of these things I'm going to do is to run this session from the Storytelling Cafe in Marrakesh. I couldn't go there this time, but in November, the quietest time in the tourist years is November and February. So that's when the Marrakeshians, if that's the right example, want people to come and have a festival and fill up all their hotels and things like that. Anyway, so it's just an idea. So if anybody's interested, in 2 weeks' time, I'll come up again. All right. And we can just, it doesn't.
I'm planning to be there in November, Mike. So.
Yeah, and I'm sure that there's the great and good storytelling, storytellers from all over the world, which I'm not one of, But we can have a really, really nice sort of weekend and meet each other live. It's got to be COVID and things. And I don't think it will cost too much money. I think we're talking about, in English money, £50 for an airplane to get us there and back again, and a bit of food while we're over there. And we'll ask the World Storytelling Cafe about accommodation. So we'll leave that one to me for the moment. But if you're interested, Keith and Baba and Manuela, are you going to do a story? Are you going to do a story to finish? Or?
Yeah, I'll do a little quick funny story that I use for.
I know you have. I know you're part of the great and good, and you've got students that you teach and everything else. But if you wanted to bring some students over as well, I'm sure we could arrange for that.
Wow, that would be great.
Okay? And sometimes you have to just have faith. There was a whole Hollywood film about baseball, and the name of the film was Build It and They Will Come. Right. So we have a festival over here. Festival, Get a Word in Edgeways, build it and people will come. If we start talking about this, and I'm not talking about instant, I've got a festival to run in July, so I'm not doing it, but in November, just before the Christmas time and everything else, if anybody's interested, we can, when John was there, I'm sure we can make it happen if we want to. Okay, anyway, so it was just an idea tonight, and I haven't mentioned it to John or to Mike Wood or anybody else. It was just to see who was interested. Right, Manuela, you're going to finish up first tonight, please.
Yeah.
Thank you very much.
I'm going to be sweet and short. So this is a story adapted for language learners, And it comes from Fables for Our Time by James Thurber. Don't know if you know him, Mike. You seem to know them all.
Well, I've just been around for an awful long time. I was just reading the message from Janet. So what was the name of the game? What was the name of the person?
James Thurber.
No.
Fables for Our Time.
Right, okay. Right.
So, story.
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 Tell us a story. Once, not twice, not 3 times, but once upon a time, there was a man eating his breakfast. He was happy because his wife was still in bed, and there was nobody to say, don't do this, don't do that, and don't read the newspaper at the table. It was a warm, sunny day. He looked out of the window, and what do you think he saw? Baba, be my
Sky.
The sky, and what else?
Outside.
Outside, and what is there outside?
Stars.
Stars. It was a beautiful sunny day.
He had exceptional eyesight if he saw stars on a beautiful sunny day.
Well, shall I tell you what he saw?
Go on.
He saw a beautiful white unicorn with a golden horn right in the middle of its forehead. What do you think the unicorn was doing in this man's garden?
Looking for Harry Potter.
He was actually eating the roses in his garden. So the man ran upstairs to the bedroom and woke his wife up. Wake up, wake up. There's a unicorn in the garden, he said, eating the roses. Well, you can imagine how his wife reacted. She opened her eyes, looked at him coldly. Don't be silly. Unicorns are mythical beasts. The man walked back downstairs, out into the garden, and the unicorn was still there. Now, oh goodness, it was eating the tulips, even worse than Baba C. Here, unicorn, said the man, and gave the unicorn a lily. And the unicorn ate the lily. The man was very excited and went back upstairs to tell his wife. Hey, the unicorn, he said. The unicorn even ate the lily. His wife looked at him angrily and said, you are totally bonkers, and I'm going to have to put you in a mental hospital. The man went back downstairs and into the garden to watch his beautiful unicorn. But the unicorn had disappeared, gone, no trace of it. The man felt sad and sat down under the roses and fell asleep. As soon as he was asleep, his wife telephoned the police and a psychiatrist, and she told them to hurry and to bring a straitjacket. When the psychiatrist arrived, he sat down and was very interested in the wife's story. My husband, he said, saw a unicorn this morning. The police looked at the psychiatrist. The psychiatrist looked at the police. He told me it ate a lily, she said. The police looked at the psychiatrist. The psychiatrist looked at the police. He told me it had a golden horn in the middle of its forehead. At a signal from the psychiatrist, the police seized the wife and put her in a straitjacket. At that moment, the man came from the garden. Did you tell your wife you saw a unicorn? The police asked. Of course not. Unicorns are mythical beasts, he replied. That's all I wanted to know, said the psychiatrist. He turned to the police and said, take her away. Then he turned to the husband and said, I'm sorry, sir, but your wife is mad. We will have to put her in an institution. The husband smiled and lived happily ever after. Equal opportunity.
Oh, that was lovely, Manuela. Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
And of course, you all know why the unicorns are mythical, because at once they used to roam the earth with all the others. But a fellow was called Noah in the Bible, was putting all the animals on the ark 2 by 2, and the unicorns were asleep behind the rock. So when the ark sailed away, the unicorns weren't on the ark, so he didn't save them. And so we've never seen them since, which, as everybody knows, why there's no unicorns in Shropshire.
But if you look hard enough, you can see them in your garden.
Well, they're looked after by the hobbits.
I love them.
Just don't tell your wife unless you want terrible things to happen.
Unicorns and hobbits. Is this normal banter for you guys?
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah.
Did you get that bad
What's
pun?
the matter, Baba? Don't you do this kind of banter? No?
Yeah, but I just made a pun. I don't know if anyone got it.
No, we didn't get it at all.
Oh,
Absolutely
I mispronounced. My accent got in the way. I'm supposed to say normal,
Normal.
Yes.
but my accent got in the way.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Nobody got it at all, Baba. Nobody got it at all.
No.
Maria, are we talking too fast for you? Do we need to slow down a bit? Are you understanding what we're saying?
Yes, you. It's difficult because you speak different dialects.
Maria, we can't understand what he's saying.
Yes, I will try to improve the word. You need to remind me on the chat, Maria, if you are here. It is my diction is the word that we call it in English. And it needs to be more cultured if people are using English as their second language. And I needed to be reminded sometimes. So thank you for reminding me. And I will make sure that the language I'm using is a little bit more clearer. It's a bit of joshing about sometimes. It's a bit of going backwards and forwards with the language. And if it's your second language, you are going to struggle. Because I struggle myself and I'm supposed to understand the language. Okay. But it's also a play on words sometimes. So you'll have to forgive us. Simona's the same. I can see Simona's listening as well, and she's the same. So we will slow it down and we will be more clearer. Is that right, John?
More clearer.
More
clearer. Janet, save us, Janet.
Let's before we dig a deeper hole, let's just say it has been a fantastic night. It's been brilliant. We've been to Italy, we've been to Scotland, we've been to Washington DC, we've been to Shropshire, we've been to Lincolnshire,
Staffordshire.
Did I say
Don't forget Staffordshire. Don't forget
Staffordshire. And where are you, in Gloucestershire?
I'm in Wiltshire, actually.
Wiltshire. Well, okay, Wiltshire.
Yeah. So anyway, we've been around, and it's been a great night. Thank you, Mike, as always, for hosting our. So it'll be in 2 weeks' time. I don't know what the date is, but the next one it'll be 7 o'clock in the evening, most likely. We're rearranging stuff because of the times are strange in Morocco because of Ramadan at the moment, and we started today, and I've got to work out when the Moroccan thing is happening each week. But for the moment,
Yeah.
we have on Tuesday at 4:30, as always, our young international tellers. Manuela, please bring people along. Anyone else, please bring
Ramadan, it's
Yeah.
Ramadan, so it might be difficult, but I'll try.
Yeah, well,
Yeah.
it's difficult. Well, there's actually it's Ramadan. It's perfectly okay to tell stories in Ramadan. I've checked this out, and people pass the time because it's that's what one thing that they're allowed to do is tell stories.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
Ramadan, so storytelling is fine in Ramadan, and so on Friday at 6 o'clock in the evening, there's children's storytelling. It's me.
No, you,
Yeah, just,
John Rowe,
just
telling stories
yeah. Well,
this Friday.
nah. Well, it's just hopefully
I
the
can toot
COVID
your
thing-
horn.
Yeah, thank you, Baba C.
Right.
And
Okay.
and I think that's pretty well it. So thank you,
Well,
Mike.
just before you finish, John, on Tuesday night this week, we have Taking on the Tradition, which is Amy Douglas, who was over in Marrakesh, and she is talking to someone from the tradition, from a different culture, for an hour on Tuesday at, if you're looking, Taking on the Tradition, it's called. And I'm not quite sure, to be fair, who she's got this, because I haven't seen her for a couple of weeks. But it's always a fascinating hour. And then on Thursday, we have our Get a Word in Line concert, which is a £5 in English money. But if you haven't got any money, donations are fine. And it's on Thursday from 8 o'clock to 10 o'clock. And we get people from, and Amy puts that together, collaborations and all sorts of stuff. So it's all worth
I
it.
think I shall be there this Thursday.
I've got a feeling you might be, Baba. actually.
Yes.
Yeah. So what are you
Oh.
doing exactly?
Who asked the question? Oh, me?
Yeah.
She asked me if I would tell a story this Thursday.
Yeah, I thought it. I was wondering. I was expecting you to mention it about an hour ago, but
Yeah, well,
you
you
and
know,
your ego and everything else.
oh, I didn't bring my ego with me today, but yes, this Thursday, in addition to the other miraculous, fantastical storytellers, the teller from the United States of America, you know, I had to go to Africa to be an American. But anyhow, the African American is going to tell a story or two.
Well, that's
And
right.
I guarantee when you tune in and listen to me, you'll have a good time. But if you're not careful, you might learn something new.
Right, and we're actually, and I need people to buy tickets because I have to pay him. Okay?
Yes, 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 yes.
Yeah. And Manuela, I want you to think about what I was saying in November. I've had a
Yeah.
message from Janet to say that it's the Orkney Storytelling Festival on at the end of October. We will make sure it doesn't clash, Janet, because Tom Muir is it's not that I know everybody, I've just been around for a long time. But Tom Muir is a very good friend of mine as well. And so I'm not going to clash with anything he's doing in the Orkney. And I know Kath Edwards is going up there for her, and that will be great. Okay. Anyway, thank you very much, John, for doing it all again. And to Ali, who's been running the session behind the scenes and everything else,
Thank
who
you,
I
Ali.
haven't got to meet personally. But the November thing has sprung to mind. And I know that you're going to have your great big festival in February, but this is just, you've got a worldwide storytelling cafe. We need to use it a bit, John. And
I
so
think
perhaps
so.
the quietest week in November, before the Christmas rush and everything, we could, just us here, we could have a look at popping over. Doesn't it sound cool, Keith? We're just popping over to
Yeah.
Marrakesh for the weekend.
Sounds good to me.
Okay.
Hey, Mike.
And they won't need to book any stars because we'll be the stars of the mini festival. Okay.
Mike, your reference is just popping over to Marrakesh for
Yes.
50 pounds. Whew. But that reminded me of a long time ago when I had some students, we were supposed to talk about what they had done over the weekend. And one of my students said, oh, no, we didn't do anything. We didn't do anything special. But his mother told me they had just gone to Jamaica for the weekend. That's special. I said, well, didn't you go to Jamaica? Oh, yeah, we did that. Well, what did you do? Oh, nothing special. They were on the glass boat seeing the fishies and snorkeling, but it wasn't anything special. But anyhow, I just
Well,
wanted to toss that
years
in.
ago, just after I got married, the cricket club. Cricket is a game we play over here with a bat and ball. Baba,
Yes, yes.
from Herefordshire, we popped over to the Channel Islands to Jersey to play cricket. So we went on a Friday and we came back on a Sunday. When I went back on work on the Monday, and they said, "Where have you been?" I said, "Well, I went to Jersey." They said, "What are you doing over there?" "Playing cricket." That's why we went. we had 2 cricket games and came back again. It was a beautiful time. Just popping over. Yeah, that's the expression.
Well,
we're talking.
I don't know what is so much of a fuss. My son has just spent a weekend with me, and he lives in Jersey, and he's just popped over to see me.
Yes,
So,
exactly. Yes. So I hope he bought you some flowers, Janet.
That one, those flowers came from a
Yeah.
different sun. They've got suns coming out of everywhere. They came. He's the oldest, and that was from the youngest. But he came over to tell me that I'm going to be a grandmother again. So
Great.
it was worth the
Hooray.
journey.
And what a lovely note to finish on.
Well, we'll finish on that.
Congratulations.
Absolutely,
Good night,
Janet.
everybody. You have been magnificent.